Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello, this is Dr. Russell Strickland, host of An Unconventional Life podcast, where we talk to the crazy 1% who not only earned their doctoral degrees, but went on to use them in exciting, unusual, and unconventional ways. Today, I have with me Dr. Reva Cosby, who is a superintendent at Trotwood-Madison School District in Trotwood, Ohio. Dr. Cosby has started her early career as a teacher in the classroom, and that because there are classrooms everywhere, that afforded her the opportunity to kind of follow her husband around when he had to move for his career as an executive in media. He worked as a VP of sales, and those of you who are familiar with corporate structures, they often like to move those executives around. Well, she was luckily able to follow him around as a teacher, but when she began to realize that she was reaching the ceiling as to what she could do in the classroom and wanted to be able to contribute in other ways, she decided a little bit later in life to go back and earn her doctoral degree. From there, she's gone on to be a grant writer. She's worked in a school that was actually doubled as a psych hospital. We'll talk to her a little bit about that. And then as a superintendent, she literally pulled her district back from the verge of academic distress. So Dr. Cosby, I'm glad to have you here. Before we get started with our conversation, I just want to read our sponsor message real quick. This episode, as always, is sponsored by Dissertation Done. Dissertation Done, we help adult doctoral students who may be struggling with their dissertation to get things back on track and get you to graduation as soon as possible. If you haven't yet started your dissertation and you just want someone to lead you through the process so that you don't have to endure all the slings and arrows that you see your colleagues enduring, definitely reach out to us at dissertationdone.com. Now, Dr. Cosby, I'm very excited for our call, first of all. You and I met through Dr. David Braswell, who was a guest on our show not long ago. Dr. Braswell runs Upslopes Communication. He's available at upslopes.com. Tell me a little bit about kind of your early career and what led to you deciding to pursue your doctoral degree.
Okay, well, my early career was very traditional at the onset. Of course, I went to college, and that in itself, took some doing. It wasn't necessarily expected in my situation with my family. We had 5 children, 2 years apart, and parents who were not educators or had not even went to college. So I started out teaching high school, which I loved. I loved being in high school. And then when I got married, and as you mentioned, I started to follow my husband around. We actually lived in St. Louis, Missouri. We moved to Chicago. Within 3 years, we were back in Virginia, which was home. And we left there after 3 more years in Atlanta. And finally, we landed here in the Dayton, Ohio area. Well, throughout that time, I was teaching. And that's why we felt that, as you know, teachers don't make the money that people in business make. Right. So it was okay for me to just follow him around, and there came a point, though, when I realized that I don't want to keep starting over. I don't want to be the person that has to, take that position of teaching, even though I did love it while I was doing it. I loved it so much that I actually had to be kicked out of teaching to pursue what I could do with my doctorate, because I was still teaching after I had gotten my doctorate.
How did that go, getting kicked out of teaching?
Well, it was really interesting. I loved my principal. I knew that she cared a lot about me, and thought that the fact that I was the only person in the building, including her as my principal, who had a doctorate. And so she said, you have to get out of here. You should be doing something more. And so she basically was saying, I'm not going to renew you. You need to find something. So I started to look, and I ended up teaching at Wilmington College in Wilmington, Ohio. And so
you don't normally get, in this day and age, managers who can be so selfless, who will take the good ones and say, no, we're not going to keep you. We know you've got bigger and better things that you can offer this world. And a lot of people be selfishly just hoarding you and saying, she's our best.
Yeah, no, and I do know that that is what was going on. She cared a lot about me and wanted to see me do more. So it's
Great.
very good.
That's awesome. So, so you went from teaching to deciding, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to earn my doctoral degree. As an adult who is, still working full time, how did that process work for you? What was it like to return to school, so to speak?
Right. Well, I am that traditional lifelong learner.
Sure.
I really love being a student. I think I made my husband fearful. It's like, when are you going to stop being a student and, actually start doing more of the work? But so going back to get my doctorate was really because we have been moving every 3 years. And
Okay.
I was concerned that we would move again. And so I felt like I needed to have something I could hold on to. And they can take things from you. This is what my parents would say, but they cannot take your education.
Right.
So that's sort of what made me decide to pursue my doctorate. I also do love doing research. So that part for me was interesting. And I was already dealing with ed choice as an educator. That had just come up. The whole idea that money could be given to students and they would go and get a voucher and could go
Huge
to a
thing.
private school was
Okay.
huge. And so that's what I ended up writing my dissertation about. And so it was interesting to me. So I did it for several reasons. One, as I said, I wanted to have something that I would carry with me if we were to move. I also was very interested in the research that I was working on, so that made it interesting. But life really did intervene. I had 2 children at that point.
Mhm.
One, she's brilliant. She has her master's now in counseling, but she also has cerebral palsy. So I ended up having to spend, a lot of time with her. And then my son was 5 years younger. So I was extremely busy as a parent and as a wife. And so I wouldn't even get around to doing my work until like 11 o'clock at night. So I was like working and writing from 11 to 3. And then I would have to get up as early as like 6 to be at work by 7:30, that type of life for a while. But I'm glad I did it. I would not, change that. And it ultimately has been worth it. But it was very difficult, because you have to take care of your family and you do have to do the work. I
Right.
did realize, I had to tell you this little story, which I think is interesting. When I realized that I could do it, because I've always seen people who have doctorates as like on this pedestal,
Right.
and can the average person really do this? I went over to my superintendent at the time. I went to his house. He had twins and another child, and his wife was sitting there with all these books around her. And I was like, what are you doing? And she was working on her dissertation. And the kids were young and they were running around, and there was a dog. And I literally said to myself, if she can do this, I can do this.
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
I realized that she was busy.
Well, it's important for folks to understand, particularly the folks that we work with at Dissertation Done. They tend to be adults who are going back to school. And when I say going back to school, I don't mean leaving your career. You're working full time. You've got kids. You've got a mortgage. You've got all those things going on. But yet you also are going to go back to school, and you're going to go through this doctoral degree process and ultimately the dissertation process. And the point is that there's no good time to do this,
Right.
but in fact, there's no bad time to do it either.
Right.
You can do it in your
It's
20s or your
something.
30s or your 40s or your 50s. We've had students that are working in their 60s and 70s because they wanted to teach at the college level upon retirement. That's all they wanted to do. So if I can just punch this ticket, I can teach in retirement.
And I do think that that's important. I'll tell you another thing that also spurred me on, and some people who are working on their dissertations now may want to reflect on this. I have 4 siblings. 3 of them are attorneys, and 1 worked at Xerox. So I'm very competitive. And, when I hit 40 and they were like doing all these things and I was teaching, which is a noble profession, do not
Right.
get me wrong. And I know I was helping students and all, but I felt the need to also one up them. and so continuing and finishing my dissertation became a really important thing for me to do as well.
No, I can certainly understand that wanting to make sure that when you go for Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners that
Exactly.
Hey,
You have
how's that dissertation coming along? It's almost done. It's almost
That's right. That's right. When I turned 40, and that's when I, had applied and was accepted. And people would ask me, "Well, why are you doing this so late, in your career? You're 40 years old." And knowing what I
As
know now,
if they're putting you out the
that
pasture. I
I'm
mean,
young,
40.
I still had time. But at the time, I really did understand that I was hopefully going to turn 50 in 10 years. And so would I be Reva Cosby or would I be Dr. Reva Cosby? And it was a
Absolutely.
lot to me to make that happen. And it didn't take the full 10 years. And I remember, though, on my birthday when I turned 40, me, my mother, and my sister did a girls' trip to Miami. And here I was on the beach with books all around me. As I was having to study because it was my first class and I was going to be prepared.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that drive and that identification, I think, was really important. A lot of our students that I talk with on a regular basis, they don't necessarily articulate it quite the way that you did, but they have somewhere in them this notion that I am Dr. whatever, right? And it's part of their identity. Even though they don't necessarily say it that way, they think of themselves as being an expert and being an authority and having put in the time and the effort and all these sorts of things. And they just have to actually go through the degree program to realize it, to actualize it. So I think that's an important thing that folks note, that you're really doing yourself a disservice if you don't, if you want to do this thing, if you don't pursue it, and if you are pursuing it, you need to finish it.
Finish it. I think we all know people who, because of their level of expertise, because of what they're doing in a community, they are mistakenly called doctor and they don't have it. And I think you're right. It must be a little heartbreaking to have to say, no, that's not my title.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you are feeling like, am I misrepresenting who I am? But we know, perseverance and passion and all are what you need to get it done.
Right.
A lot of people think that there's this level of intelligence, and trust me, I know we're all intelligent, but it's not like you have to be a brain surgeon, to make this happen. I think you have to want it and you have to be willing to put in and persevere through.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. There are, I don't know a lot of brain surgeons exactly, but I know a lot of medical doctors that I'd say they're not the sharpest tacks in the drawer, but they put in the work. They can do the job. I know some medical doctors who I think, oh, that person's quick. That's a smart person. Yeah. And others who I'm like, all right, well, you know the stuff.
I do think that it's important for people to understand that yes, anyone can pursue this, and if you stick with it. We literally, in my community where I grew up, had on my block, as I said, my three siblings are attorneys, and my sister actually went on and she's a judge. And my brother is going to be the first president of the Bar Association in the state of Virginia that's African American.
Oh, wow.
So that's really proud of him. That'll happen for him next year. You know how you move up.
Yeah.
So they've done really well. But we also had an astronaut on our block. Leland Melvin is an astronaut. He's actually been out in space. And it's like, so is there a special water running through our community? It wasn't. It was that belief that we could all succeed. And we had that in our community. So I do think that, if we provide the right experience for our students, then everybody understands that they have those same opportunities. You can be an astronaut. With President Obama, you can be a president. And now we have the potential of an African American vice president. So, the world is changing, and people, and we have mentioned socioeconomically, regardless of whether you're Black or white, oftentimes we feel like we can't be in these positions because we're underrepresented. And so I like to just say, yes, you can do this.
That's right. And for context, we're recording this right now in August, when Joe Biden has just recently announced Kamala Harris as his VP, as his running mate. So we'll all see what happens here in the next 80 some days as far as that's concerned. But I think what you mentioned is really important. A lot of folks feel what's psychologists refer to as the imposter syndrome. I'm not really that guy, but if you do the work and you put in the time and the effort and you earn the degree, you are
that guy. That's right.
So yeah, it's really important. Perseverance is the main thing. But then of course you have to know what you're doing. You have to, if you persevere in the wrong direction, you're not going to get where you want to go. And that's one of the things that we find students often need some help with. But tell me now, so you pursued this doctoral degree, you earned the doctoral degree. What came next for you after getting kicked out of the classroom by your benevolent principal? What kind of things did that allow you to do that you couldn't have done before, that maybe you didn't even realize were possibilities for you before you earned your degree?
When I started to look for a job, I wasn't sure where even to initially start. So I did start looking at universities, and I ended up, as I said, at Wilmington College. And since I've been a teacher, I did the teaching part, and I also managed the student teachers there. And I really liked it, but for college professors and things, in my 40s was relatively young. And so I was told by a former superintendent who was the head of the department at the time that if I had an opportunity to get back into K-12 and if I wanted to do that, that he thought there would be opportunities. So I started looking for that. And that's how I came upon the grant writing. And grant writing, for school districts is very important because it allows them to have the money to do things that they may not normally be able to do. And actually, it was when we were doing, smaller learning communities. I actually helped write the Gates grant that brought over $3 million to the District of Dayton, Ohio.
Very important.
Do that. It was very important. Yes.
We're sitting here right now. My kids are getting ready to go back to school in a couple of days here in the midst of COVID. So they're not actually going to school. School's coming to them. And the district's providing Chromebooks for everyone. And I'm sure there was a grant writer somewhere that made that happen.
About it. That is how we've gotten our connection, our one-to-one connectivity. We have grant money, philanthropy money, dollars that, people have given us. And so our students are one-to-one for this situation. And I believe that that's what we need to do at this time for the safety aspect of bringing our students back, which is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my son is a rising freshman. I don't know if you call him rising still when he's got 3 days to high school, but he's so disappointed. When I told him near the end of the school year last year that very likely he wasn't going to be setting foot in the building early in his high school career, he was very upset. And marching band's been canceled, and he wants to be on the swim and dive team, and we're worried that's coming up towards the late fall. We're worried whether that's going to happen or not. So he's upset about the things that are being taken from him in his high school career. And I can sympathize certainly, but to stay safe in this day and age is so very important.
And I think what we're going to find is the creativity of teachers. I believe there are going to be a lot of virtual opportunities for them to participate in band and to, find places where they can maybe swim and send the video to a coach and say, this is my speed, and verify it. And so I think that there's always a silver lining. And I believe the silver lining to this is going to be that we're going to learn a whole new way of teaching our children. Right. I know you've heard the analogy of if Rip Van Winkle woke up, the only thing he'd recognize was school.
And now that's going to change too.
And so now it's changing.
Yeah.
And so I do believe having my doctorate has allowed me the opportunity to have a voice in what this change is going to look like. And so for that, I'm very grateful that I did stick with it and finish.
Yeah. One of my students who is from DC and swims in those circles taught me. I learned all these little sayings from working with different people around the country. And she said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And so I like the fact that that's one thing the doctoral degree certainly affords you, is you can pretty much walk into any room and get a seat at the table, whatever it is they're doing.
That's right. I agree. Yes.
Well, tell me a little bit more about how this worked. I remember you mentioning that as a superintendent initially, or one of your first posts as a superintendent, you actually kind of pulled your school district back from the verge of academic distress. And I know, so many of our school districts do have those problems where everything that's going on in the world, it makes it so difficult to really succeed. Tell me a little bit about that situation and how that worked for you in your school district.
Okay. Yeah. So when I started my first superintendency, I was in Mount Healthy, Ohio, and there, the school district, their grades, we were a DF school. And so if you're in that position for too many years, then it's a state takeover is what happens. And your superintendent is put out of position, and they bring in what they call a CEO, who comes in and can do anything that they want. Basically, even the school board, local control is taken away. So you do not want to find yourself in academic distress. So you get the opportunity to work with what they call a state support team, and you have to make changes, to your district to try to improve your grades. And so we developed a 5-year strategic plan that everyone got onto. It was very simplistic with just 3 basic things that, we wanted to focus on, and which was, of course, our curriculum, and then our social emotional learning for our students, and also then community engagement, which seems so basic, but we really honed in on those things, and we were able to improve our scores, and we were able to move out of academic distress or even the concern for it. We, thank goodness, never got into it.
Right.
So I was very proud of that work, and I think it was beneficial to my staff because, you want to have pride in what you're doing. You don't want to always be worried about, will I have my job next year? So that was one of the things that I was able to do. And I do believe that I was able to actually get that position because I hadn't had a chance to share with you, but I did not go the traditional route to become a superintendent in a school district, which is, you are a teacher, and then you're maybe assistant principal, become a principal, and then you do some type of central office work.
Right.
Either you're an HR person or curriculum or something like that. Well, I was a principal for 8 years at a major high school in our area, and I went directly into a superintendency. And, I do believe the only reason I got that opportunity to apply was because I was Dr. Reva Cosby.
Right.
I really believe that. And the interesting thing about it is, of course, I'm the same person, that, and I know that, but I would have never gotten that opportunity because I didn't have that traditional central office experience.
Right.
To
so everybody else, you're a different person, but that's important, right? You're not Dr. Cosby to your husband, right?
Right, exactly.
You win. So that
exactly. Yeah, in one day, I mean, it's really the neatest thing in the world, is to receive that degree. But on Saturday, you don't have it, and on Sunday you do, and you're Dr. Cosby. But it changes your opportunities like you just would not believe.
It does. And that's huge. But those opportunities aren't just for you, because with the school district, you mentioned, okay, you're able to help the teachers have a little bit more sense of security and pride in their work. What did it do for your students? How did that change lives for your students?
It definitely did, because as I said, so many things would have been taken away from them if we had went into academic distress. So now I have the opportunity to not only, like you said, build that pride in the school that they go to and allow them to be, able to say, I'm a Mount Healthy grad, and that's important. It means something. But also, I was able then to refocus back on one of the things that I felt really did not help our district. We did not have a preschool. And so the community had a lot of child care centers, but child care, where children are literally taken care of, is a good thing because you don't want your child in a place you don't know, but they were not learning anything during those most formative years when they're young. So I was able then to go back and use our money to build this preschool. And so that's going to make all the difference in the world. If students get too far behind, then it's almost impossible to catch up. So all of these things have worked together, and I do feel very proud of the fact that I left Mount Healthy better than it was
Right.
when I got there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But that's something that I think that there's a lesson there for folks that are pursuing their dissertations right now. That some people think, I'm being selfish. I'm taking from my family during this time when you are, in a sense, it is a commitment for everybody in the household. But you're really being selfish if you have these talents and you have this vision and you have this urge to serve. You're really being selfish when you don't earn that
Right.
doctoral degree, because you're taking away from people your best service, your highest level of impact. And that's something that I find a lot of our students, and particularly female students, it seems to be just a thing psychologically for women, that they have this complex that I don't want to put myself first. I don't want to focus on me. But earning your doctoral degree isn't just you focusing on you, it's helping you to serve so many more people in this world, and in a way that's helpful to you too, and helpful to your family. And this is one of those positive feedback loops where everybody gets better when you make this investment in yourself. So it's so
Yes,
important.
I agree. And part of getting my doctorate completed was I had to work on campus. So I actually did work on campus, and it was sort of a trade-off financially that I was being paid, so I was able to take my classes. So I didn't take anything from my family, but I wasn't putting anything in at the time. Whereas when I was teaching, I was putting in. And I did wonder, should I be doing this? But having a support system that supports you, my husband, my children, and I did want my children to see me doing this work. I wanted them to see me putting this in. And for me, as a mother, it has paid off. Both of them have their masters. I have to get them going on doctorates, but both of my children have completed their masters, and they're a counselor and one who's in higher ed. So
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I do believe it's because they saw that. I didn't
Right.
have the opportunity. Neither of my parents went to college, but they wanted to make sure that the five of us did, because they didn't want us to work what they said as hard as they did. But I will tell you now, I think when my dad came home from the foundry, he just let it go. He
It's
didn't
a
talk
whole
about
different type of hard.
it exactly. And being a superintendent, it comes home with you,
Right. No, that's awesome. It is absolutely, it's another benefit to you working on your own doctoral degree, is that you're paying that forward to the next generation. They see that work. It normalizes, because that's something that so many of us don't have. Is a lot of us don't even know anyone else with a doctoral degree, because there's only 1% of the population, right? If you happen to swim in those circles, you might know a few people, but it's not normal by any stretch of the imagination. Going to the grocery store is normal, right? Having kids that drive you crazy sometimes and make you proud other times is normal. But sitting up late at night or getting up first thing in the morning to work on your dissertation isn't normal. And so to normalize that for your kids is doing them a great service as well. So that's a great point.
Yes. And like I said, I do think that in times like COVID, when everything is so unknown and we're having to start from scratch making decisions, I do believe that there are a lot of people who have a lot of good suggestions and things. But I do know that having my doctorate has given me the opportunity to get my decisions out there and to act on them. And so it's worth it. At the end of the day, going through all of that, ultimately has allowed me to do things that I really feel are important.
And when you say that, that actually reminds me of a story you were telling me the other day with, in this environment of COVID, a lot of people are having to pivot and do things differently. And one of the things that you've been doing is actually helping at least one of those people I remember you talking about to help a bunch to folks again, helping people help. It's a theme among people with their doctoral degrees, it seems. But tell me, you know what I'm talking about. Tell me about what you're doing with that.
You get sort of called to action because you have your doctorate. I received a phone call from a sister of a friend, and she's starting Val Academy, which is offering tutoring services to parents who have to go to work, but their kids need to, of course, go to school and to learn, and they can't go into school because schools now, for a lot of people are not deemed as safe. So what she's doing is interviewing people, and she's received, hundreds of resumes, but she needed someone to actually interview the certified teachers because she didn't feel that she would be able to know if the answers were what she needed.
What they're supposed to be.
And, so I've done that for her. And like I said, I know she knows a lot of people who are in education, but she didn't know many people with a doctorate. And it gave a level of credibility to what I would bring to the table. And interestingly enough, we did do an interview yesterday, and we were able to rule out someone who, I knew from my experience going through this process and all, they were not right to mentor young males. So it really is helpful. And I do think, like you said, she's just saw a need and is creating that opportunity.
Right. So what they're doing basically is parents who can't be there to help their children through these, virtual school meetings where the kids are actually at home. They're able to either bring folks into the home or virtually bring folks into the home to help the children through the school day. Because the schools, sometimes it's not entirely clear with some school districts exactly what the kids are supposed to be doing throughout the day. So you've got a touchdown there, a tutor that's going to be able to help students do that.
And, it's interesting because she was excited to get her first clients. The idea is great, but will people take you up on it?
Right.
But I think you're right. I think in this time of change and uncertainty, they wanted to know for sure that their students would have a good tutor. I also have found the opportunity. Another thing that's happening at this time is this understanding that we have to look at equity and diversity, and school districts don't always have everybody. They don't have like a full plate of diverse people, working in a lot of school districts. Ohio has 614 school districts, and we range from very rural and huge, like maybe 50 miles, to where I was in Mount Healthy was a 7-mile district. And we had kids who came from other places, but you understand that level of diversity. And so it's the same when we look at the population. So I have another young lady who is a friend who started a business where she is going to provide equity training to teachers who and diversity training who've only dealt with people who look like them, and so she's asked me to also be a part of her team and do some of the presenting and talking about, ways to interact with students who are different, than what you. Yeah.
And those are just opportunities, as you mentioned, that don't tend to come to you unless you have your doctoral degree, right? People start to seek you out because you're special, whether you feel it or not, whether you feel like, oh, I'm still that same little girl that grew up with, the dad from the foundry or whatever, but you've done so much since then. And most other people, important to remember, haven't gone through that process and done everything that they need to do to earn a doctoral degree. So it is a big difference. I think in that previous business you mentioned, it also brings credibility to her and her business when she's bringing staff in. It's like, we're not going to tolerate no junk here. We got Dr. Cosby interviewing you.
Yes.
The bar is high when you've got a doctor running the interview.
I think you're exactly right. And I do think that it would be important for students who are in their 40s, 50s, whatever, and going back to school for their doctorate to understand it is a lot to learn. It is still a lot out there for you to learn. And so when I do these things, when I help people, I realize how I know how to do these things because I went through the research process, because I did those things that led to me ultimately completing my doctorate. And so that work is relevant. It is important. It keeps you abreast of what's happening. So I do think that getting it complete makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. It's just one of those things. Again, there aren't that many people who have the first name doctor. So it's important. If it's something that's in your heart, if it's something that you're actually working on right now, figure out what you need to do, what might be getting in your way to keep moving forward. If it's motivation, look to people like Dr. Cosby and all the people that she's able to help with this doctoral degree. Okay, it's not just about you; it's about the impact that you can make in the world, and not just for your community, but also for your family. If you think you're taking from your family now, you'll be giving back in multiples. So definitely keep at it, stick to it. You can do it. I've done it. Dr. Cosby's done it. There are others out here that have those stories of not coming from a family full of professors, and it's still doable. So definitely keep after it. So Dr. Cosby, what if somebody's got an idea and they're maybe working in a new idea in education, and they'd like somebody to talk to about it, and they could use a little bit of help or consulting. Is it okay for them to reach out to you and see if you might be able to help them out as well?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Yes, I can be reached with my email, which is drrevac@gmail.com. I love to hear new ideas, and like you said, I not only are we involved in education, but because of my doctorate, I get involved in legislation and things like that as well. So it's so many things that having that has afforded me, and being a superintendent as well. So yes, if someone has an idea, if they even just like to run it by me, do you think this is something that's viable? I'm more than happy to listen.
That's awesome. Out there still helping as many people as you can. So that's drrevac@gmail.com. We're going to put that down in the show notes, so you'll be able to just click on that link if you'd like to get to her. Thank you so much, Dr. Cosby, for everything that you shared with us today. This has been, I think, it's very motivating to our listeners and to our viewers on YouTube. Thank you again for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
And then once again, I'd like to just remind you guys that today's episode was sponsored by Dissertation Done. In fact, at Dissertation Done, there's two ways that we help folks. One is for those of you who are working on your dissertation, about to start your dissertation, or just want to get it done sooner. Reach out to us at dissertationdone.com. Actually, you can go to dissertationdone.com/done, and you can reach out to us about getting your dissertation done. And if you've maybe you're out there living your unconventional life right now, but you have a message that you want to share with the world, we do have another program called Expand Your Authority. And Expand Your Authority is all about getting your book published and out there in the world in such a way that you make yourself more visible, so that these opportunities that Dr. Cosby and I were talking about might just come to you through folks that see your book and get a chance to read your book. So if you'd like to become a published author, you can go to dissertationdone.com/book and find out more about Expand Your Authority as well. Dr. Cosby, once again, thank you so much, and best of luck to you as the school year gets started. I certainly hope that you guys are able to get off to a great start in this current virtual environment, and that you're able to have your kids back in the schoolhouses as soon as possible.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.